Hi friends, and welcome back to another episode of Coffee and Conspiracy here on A Moment with Hales. I am so excited to be doing my second Coffee and Conspiracy episode for this year, and we are going to be talking about, I know you guys are going to roll your eyes, the conspiracy of bacon and eggs. I know, there is a conspiracy in everything, friends. I swear there is, and so we are going to be jumping into the conspiracy of our favorite breakfast food today. So, to start with this topic, we are going to talk about a gentleman named Edward Bernays. He is known as being an influential person in the field of public relations. Public relations really changed a lot through Edward Bernays because he brought a little secret weapon into the field of public relations, if you will, and the secret weapon is called propaganda. He literally wrote the book on it. And I have his book here, and we are going to read the first sentence out of the book, well, the first two, on what propaganda is and kind of what his idea was behind it. Okay, his book says, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country." So definitely a man who is interested in manipulating the unconscious, kind of working behind the shadows, behind the scenes, an invisible government, if you will, to rule over people or influence their behavior. And the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree here because Edward Bernays was actually the nephew of Sigmund Freud, who I'm sure you know has been attributed to being the father of psychology. And while he didn't necessarily create the field of psychology himself, he did influence the field in definitely some interesting ways. So one of the theories that Sigmund Freud contributed to psychology is psychoanalysis. And he believed that the mind had three levels: consciousness, pre-consciousness, and unconsciousness. Sigmund Freud spent a lot of time studying the unconscious mind and how it actually could influence our behavior and decisions. According to Freud, thoughts and emotions outside our awareness continue to exert an influence on our behaviors, even though we are unaware of these underlying influences. Now, I do have a lot of personal opinions about the field of psychology and Sigmund Freud. I am not going to digress into those today, but I do think it's very important for you guys to know that there was a lot of criticism against Sigmund Freud, and there was actually a theory brought up called the Freudian cover-up, and it was introduced in 1971 that asserted that Sigmund Freud intentionally ignored evidence that his patients were victims of sexual abuse. There's a lot of really crazy and disturbing stuff in regards to Sigmund Freud. It's really an untaught history to us in the field of psychology. I do suggest you look at it. I will link a couple articles below per usual because I think it's important for you to know. And it's important for us to know that this was Edward Bernays' uncle and that he did influence a lot of his ideas behind propaganda and how he actually applied the unconscious desires and ideas into his propaganda campaigns. Public relations, various methods are used in business to influence our purchases, but they are also used in government to influence our behavior. And propaganda is actually used in entertainment and music, which is, we're not going to get into a ton of that today, but definitely you'll see propaganda in different entertainment campaigns and different things. It's very fascinating. Also, propaganda has been used in entertainment for years. It's when your mind is relaxed and you're in almost a trance when you're watching the television that you can take in more of this propaganda information. And fun fact, one of the co-founders of Netflix was actually related to Edward Bernays, who also is related to Sigmund Freud. So maybe think twice when you're consuming Netflix or other streaming services to what propaganda is being inputted through this entertainment. So going back to Edward Bernays, he actually worked with presidents. He worked with President Coolidge, Hoover, Eisenhower, and Henry Ford. The government, specifically the CIA, actually hired Edward Bernays to help with public perception in overthrowing a government. One of his most famous campaigns was with the American Tobacco Company. He launched a groundbreaking campaign. It was called the Torches of Freedom. As a PR nerd, this is super interesting to me. So he influenced almost 50% of women in the US to pick up smoking. I feel like virtually overnight. I think it took, they said, about 6 weeks. So let's hear from Edward Bernays himself and about how he got involved in the Torches of Freedom campaign.
Even George Washington Hill, the advertising genius who made Lucky Strikes America's best-selling cigarettes, couldn't figure out how to break through the social barriers that kept women from smoking. So he turned to a public relations genius, Edward Bernays.
He said, "We have a problem. We're losing half the market in America because there is a taboo against women smoking, particularly smoking in the streets." He said, "I want your help on that." So I said, before I can offer you a suggestion or a recommendation, I would like your authority to visit Dr. A.A. Brill, who was the leading psychoanalyst of his time. So I went to Dr. Brill and I said, "Can you tell me what cigarettes mean to women?" And as quick as that, he said, "Cigarettes to women are torches of freedom that they use to dramatize their objection to the taboo against smoking by men." And then he added as an afterthought, "and they titillate the erogenous zones of the lips." So I left and wondered what to do with that information. And I decided we would get debutantes to light torches of freedom in the Easter parade to protest man's inhumanity to women by the taboo against smoking. Within 6 weeks, smoking became an accepted pattern for women throughout the United States.
So again, influencing people, their unconscious behavior that they didn't even really think that they had, to dictate them making a decision that they didn't even know they wanted to make. Whether we realize it or not, we are constantly being influenced to modify our behavior. This could be, again, to make a purchase from a company which doesn't seem super nefarious, or to influence a social agenda or social changes or behaviors as a society. But it can be dangerous propaganda because when you combine it with social media, I just think it's a firestorm. Propaganda can be even powerful enough to change your perception of reality. And that's one of my things about social media. When you're scrolling, if you're living through a screen, your perception of reality can be altered so quickly. We have echo chambers on social media. If you start following certain things, the algorithm's goal is to keep you on that platform for as long as possible, to consume as much content as you want to, or as it wants you to. And you can create a complete perception of reality if you're living through a screen. It can be completely controlled and you can be so manipulated. So it's very important to understand what propaganda is and how to identify it, because it has the ability to influence an entire generation to adapt a habit or change behavior, and sometimes that's overnight. It can be that effective. So where is the conspiracy of bacon and eggs? Okay, friends, yes, a conspiracy is right there on your breakfast plate. You can thank Edward Bernays for having bacon and eggs for breakfast. I know that sounds crazy, but in the 1920s, he was hired to move more products, specifically bacon.
Many years ago, our client was the Beechnut Packing Company. We made a research and found out that the American public ate very light breakfasts of coffee, maybe a roll, and orange juice. We went to our physician, found that a heavy breakfast was sounder from the standpoint of health than a light breakfast, because the body loses energy during the night and needs it during the day. We asked the physician, after telling him why we were talking to him, would he be willing, at no cost, to write to 5,000 physicians and ask them whether their judgment was the same as his, confirmed his judgment. He said he would be glad to do it. We carried out a letter to 5,000 physicians. Obviously, all of them concurred that a heavy breakfast was better for the health of the American people than a light breakfast. That was publicized in the newspapers. Newspapers throughout the country had headlines saying 4,500 physicians urge heavy breakfast in order to improve health of American people. Many of them stated that bacon and eggs should be embodied with the breakfast, and as a result, the sale of bacon went up. And I still have a letter from Bartlett Arkell, president of Beech-Nut Packing Company, telling me so.
So friends, next time you have some bacon and eggs, you can thank Edward Bernays for your breakfast. I think it's important to note here too, the question that was pointed to the doctors is, would you support a hearty breakfast or a light breakfast? It doesn't say, would you support bacon and eggs or would you support toast and some tea? That's another thing about the whole movement behind this propaganda is the full information isn't even there. It's a question that is pointed in a way that's going to get the result that he ultimately wanted. And while some doctors, yes, did say they would recommend bacon and eggs, I don't know if that's what every doctor had in mind for what a hearty breakfast truly really is. But it's become the American breakfast that we all know and love. Another controversial topic we can thank Edward Bernays for is in regards to fluoride. So when the government wanted to put fluoride in the water, they hired Edward Bernays to go ahead and get that campaign going for them. So I will show you a little clip of that now as well.
What other examples exist? Well, let's listen to an interview with Christopher Bryson, a former BBC reporter who wrote a book about how that deadly poison, sodium fluoride and stannous fluoride, ended up in our drinking water. A recent Scientific American article about fluoride has only confirmed what scientists and researchers have known about that chemical for decades, namely that it is a poison which may be doing irreparable damage to our bodies, including adverse effects on the bones, the brain, the thyroid gland, and, yes, the teeth. What the Scientific American article leaves out is what most people have left out for a long time regarding fluoride, namely 3 important facts. One, that fluoride was put into the water in the concentration camps in Nazi Germany and the gulags in Russia in order to create a docile worker, as that is one of the effects of this dangerous compound. 2, that sodium fluoride used to be a common ingredient in rat poisons and roach poisons in the United States. And 3, that fluoride is in fact a hazardous industrial waste byproduct that is created, among other things, in the production of aluminum, and that the first people to heavily influence the debate about fluoridating water was the aluminum industry, which was looking at a way of gaining public acceptance of the growing pollution of fluoride in the water supplies around aluminum factories. Christopher Bryson's book, The Fluoride Deception, reveals these facts and many more about this dangerous compound. But another fact that his book uncovers is the link between Edward Bernays and the fluoride deception.
The book makes clear for the first time that the selling of fluoride to the American public was done by the best in the business, by the father of public relations, Edward Bernays. While my book uncovers correspondence between Bernays and the National Institutes of Dental Research. Bernays was asked to come to Washington by the NIDR to help create their PR campaign to sell fluoride to the nation. Bernays understood that people have an unconscious trust in their doctor or their dentist, and if you can persuade doctors and dentists that fluoride is safe and good, then you're able to reach the rest of the nation. People believe their doctors and dentists, and that was a way of promoting fluoride for Bernays.
I know, crazy, right? So I'm going to link below the video from James Corbett. He actually covers Edward Bernays. It's a short video. I recommend you watch it. It definitely goes into more detail about Edward Bernays and how he was influential within the government and public health, and you will be left probably considering, like I do, you don't really believe too much in organic coincidences anymore, as I really don't. But Getting back to propaganda, propaganda also is powerful because it usually is coming from wanting to invoke an emotional response. So back in the day, people advertised with facts, logic. They were thinking people could actually deduct and use reasoning, and the best facts won an audience over. When propaganda was developed, it's the biggest emotional response, or the loudest response with the most emotion you can get, is going to generate revenue or generate behavior changes. And that's what Edward Bernays really was going after, is an emotional response. So we see that in the Torches of Freedom movement. It's women getting excited. We're all working together. We're going to fight against men by smoking. We're so cool. We are just like awesome. Yay, down with patriarchy. Yay with women smoking. We're so healthy, right? Okay. Anyways, they're basically wanting to make it be an emotional response. Same thing with bacon and eggs. Okay, bacon and eggs. It's an American breakfast. We're Americans. We eat bacon and eggs. Again, an emotional kind of response in regards to bacon and eggs, right? Not really an emotional topic. We're not thinking logically, we're thinking emotionally. And that's super, super important to recognize, because we all need to apply caution when we're being exposed to propaganda, because it can create an illusion for a generation that the world has always been a certain way. I grew up thinking bacon and eggs were always for breakfast, right? Well, not that long ago, they weren't. So my generation grew up believing something that not that long ago was not a fact, if you will. So over time, these artificial behaviors can become normalized in society, and it makes it hard to even imagine a world where anyone behaved differently. One example I have from my own life, and I will say, I think my generation, I'm the ones below, or it's even worse, all the propaganda you're getting on social media and everything. But we started with just the dial-up internet, AOL. We were excited to set our away message. We had Zanga. I think one of the most propagandized generation is mine because of all the media influence that we have. So one thing that I remember seeing for the first time, I was on an airplane and I opened up, they had those little magazines with you could buy stuff in them. And there was something on it and it was called the selfie stick. And I remember thinking, how dumb. Who on earth is going to buy a stick that you put your phone on the end to take a picture of yourself? I was just like, this is so silly. No one's going to buy this. Well, come to find out, I don't even know how many selfie sticks have probably been sold, and I actually have two myself. So not the selfie sticks, I have tripods. I'm gonna save myself here. I never had a selfie stick. I just used my arm. I have long arms anyways. My friends are always like, you need to take a picture of the long arms. I'm like, thanks guys. I'm always on the end. But just saying, we've been propagandized to think selfie sticks are normal. These generations below us, I don't know if people use selfie sticks as much anymore, but it's not like a stupid thing to them. They're like, oh yeah, get out my selfie stick. That's like a normal thing, where in our generation, it was not. There's so many things like that now, friends, that literally seem super, super normal. But if you really think about it, back in the day, even a cell phone, like us being able to carry a little video entertaining thing all around all the time. So technology is rapidly changing. I won't get into too much about technology and technocracy. I am doing a new series, Technocracy Loading. If you want to check out the promo for that, it's in my Coffee Conspiracy, or its own playlist. So check it out if you want, Technocracy Loading. But getting back to propaganda, I'm getting ahead of myself. James Corbett, actually, to bring it all home, he asked the question like this. He says, what will be engineered into the next generation that they will assume it has always been this way when it's actually a conditioned behavior? And I really think there may be a day, I know I sound crazy, I know there might be a day years from now where people are actually going to laugh and think, oh my gosh, people used to go outside and grow their own food. Oh my gosh, that was so much work. Like, who wants to go out and grow their own food? We can go get it from our factory now. And I feel like we're halfway there at this point. And I do think there's just going to be so much propaganda in regards to food and what it actually is and what it actually comes from. But that's a conspiracy for another day. So, friends, I'm wrapping it all up here. So now that we know where propaganda actually has come from, who started it, what it is, you want it to be emotional, how it can be used against us, we are going to look through a few examples of propaganda. Now, I just want to say, before I jump into this, please try to look at this with an objective mind. I'm going to be hitting on some hot button issues, if you will, but whatever side of the political aisle you're on or whatever your personal emotional opinion is, have a second, have your emotional response, and then step back and try to look at it objectively through the propaganda lens and see how this propaganda, we're watching video, we're doing some screenshots, those types of things, actually is influencing your mind, your unconscious behavior to feel a certain way, because that is the point of it. So let's dive into it together and take a look at some propaganda that I hope you guys don't all get mad about. Okay, friends, so the first form of propaganda we are going to be looking at is called bandwagon propaganda. So this is like familiar with the phrase, get on the bandwagon. The idea of this propaganda is to show you that everyone else is doing it, so you need to go ahead and do it too because we've got to follow the majority. The first example I have of bandwagon propaganda goes back to the summer of 2020, which a lot of this stuff, there was so much propaganda that year. But it was the event that I'm sure if you were on social media, you remember called Blackout Tuesday. And it was a collective action to protest racism and police brutality. So it was a day when you were told that you should post a solid black square to represent that you were supporting the Blackout Tuesday and the protest and agendas. Again, this is a really good form of propaganda because as you're scrolling through, you're going to see all these black squares and you're going to feel really overwhelmed to also support because everyone else is doing it. It seems like it's normal because everyone is participating. This supports my other idea of social media being able to alter and change your perception of reality. You're going to be looking on this tiny little screen and you're going to feel influenced to respond how everyone else is responding. It's propaganda. It's bandwagon propaganda. The second bandwagon propaganda example I have from our recent lives, it seemed like overnight we were being told by celebrities, we were being told by social media, we were being told by commercials, we were being told by bumper stickers, I mean, every which way, we were being inundated to support Ukraine. And another effective way that this was done was by putting Ukrainian flags in your profile. I stand with Ukraine. That was the phrase. You had to have the flag in your bio. This is a great form of propaganda because you're going to see it over and over and over again. And this is going to be a bandwagon theory. If everyone else is supporting it, then you're going to feel compelled to do the same. And this is also why I want to say too, I think there's a lot of bots online. There's a theory, it's called the dead internet theory, where when you're actually online, the majority of people, whatever you want to call them online, are bots. And these bots are being programmed to say and do things that are going to influence the public. Again, propaganda. That's a genius propaganda idea, you guys, to have millions of bots out there pushing bandwagon propaganda, making everyone think that the majority is thinking in one way is going to influence people to make different decisions. The second form of propaganda we're going to look at is fear propaganda. So fear appeals are persuasive messages that attempt to arouse fear by emphasizing the potential danger and harm that will befall individuals if they do not adapt the recommendations. So we're being told you need to be fearful if you don't respond to this specific situation or circumstance in this manner, then you need to be afraid. And fear propaganda is everywhere, and I think we especially lived through it during the pandemic. The example I'll give for fear propaganda during the pandemic was the death toll count on the TV. There's a reason that they wanted a death toll count listed. That invoked fear, that made people feel like they needed to respond a certain way to whatever was being told to them by that news outlet because they were afraid and they saw this number here in the bottom corner of the screen. The second form of propaganda that I'm seeing a lot of information being put out there about the bird flu and how we need to respond to the bird flu specifically to ensure that we're going to not have any danger or harm to us. So again, if you're being told about something that can invoke fear, but then you're being told to respond in a really specific manner, you need to consider what is this authority figure going to gain from me responding in this sort of manner. Fear is an extremely effective form of propaganda. And sometimes it's really important for us just to take a step back, take a beat, say a prayer, and then come back to the circumstance or situation and decide how we want to respond. Not how we want to emotionally respond, but how we want to logically respond. And we're going to close with my favorite form of propaganda because it is used most prevalently, I would say, in political ads. It's called glittering generalities. It's this idea to invoke an emotional happiness, almost like the feeling of nostalgia when it comes to a specific ad or political slogan or campaign. There's no true substance to what's being said, but it's really going to make you feel really good, really motivated, and probably really supportive of whatever you're watching. Like the political campaign slogans like hope and change. Yes, everyone wants hope and change. Giving us a brighter future. Yes, everyone wants a brighter future. The golden age of America. Yes, who doesn't want a golden age? But none of these things are really specific, and none of them have a true path to the goal. It's just an idea that we're all going to want to get behind because it seems so wonderful. And I'm going to put in a political ad here that I found for Ronald Reagan that I love. I'm obsessed with it. It made me so happy. I was like, this is fabulous. He does talk a little bit about what he has done, but if you truly really listen to the words of the ad, it's just kind of general ideas that everyone's going to want to get behind because it's a general idea. So I'm going to go ahead and play it for you guys because I loved it so much.
It's morning again in America. Today, more men and women will go to work than ever before in our country's history. With interest rates at about half the record highs of 1980, nearly 2,000 families today will buy new homes, more than at any time in the past 4 years. This afternoon, 6,500 young men and women will be married. And with inflation at less than half of what it was just 4 years ago, they can look forward with confidence to the future. It's morning again in America. And under the leadership of President Reagan, our country is prouder and stronger and better. Why would we ever want to return to where we were less than 4 short years ago?
So friends, I hope this Coffee and Conspiracy episode helps you the next time you come across some propaganda just to consider, why am I responding so emotionally to a certain topic? And what behavioral modification is being conditioned upon me through this propaganda? An even bigger picture, what engineered behavioral change is being provoked through this propaganda to influence society collectively? And the biggest question of them all, why would this behavioral change be advantageous by those who have created this propaganda campaign? Well, I'll let you decide if you need the tinfoil bow or not. Until next time, friends, cheers!